And welcome back, everyone, to Saint's Journey. Today's episode, we're going to talk about my journey so far in religion and a little bit of background about myself. Oh, yeah, I have the intro done. I just want to first thank everyone for all the support so far in that first video last week. I truly appreciate all the subscribers so far and people who commented. I'm excited and truly happy that you guys are willing to come on this journey with me. So to begin, I forgot to introduce myself in that first video. I was watching it and then I realized nobody knows who I am. My name is Josh Perez and I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I wasn't always a member of this church. So I was baptized into the Catholic Church when I was young. So I always had the idea of God and Jesus in my life. Mom raised me as a single mother, and she always had God in the household. I always remember either going to church or praying for food, praying when I go to bed. I always had the idea of God throughout my life. We frequently attended Catholic masses up until I would want to say around 7. We switched over to the local born again Christian church called Faith Community, and we attended for a while, and then we switched over to a different congregation called Calvary Chapel, and it was pretty much the same thing, teaching wise, I would say, same kind of style. And then eventually I would come to find and join the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So to start as my childhood, I always remembered going to church and wouldn't want to go with the kids group. I would always want to stay with mom. I think a lot of this was I was always shy to be around other kids, or I just didn't like being alone or being away from my mom as a child. I just always felt more comfortable sitting with her at church. So I don't really remember too much about the Catholic church services I would attend. I just remembered as a child it would just be a long service, and it was a lot of just listening, I would say, or just hearing it from the Father speaking to us. And when we switched over to Faith Community, it was a little bit more engaging, I would say, for just anyone who would attend. There was more music, there was more interaction between the pastor and the congregation. There was just, I think it seemed more like a dialogue. Well, me and mom kind of stopped going to church frequently. Sundays was kind of mine and mom's day to do things. In high school, I tended to just stay home more just because I lived in a different city than the high school I lived in. So I really didn't hang out with friends outside of school or outside of wrestling. Typically with my mom, Sundays was her only day off from work, so that's when we would plan to do things. Some Sundays we went to church, but most of the time we were spending it with family. We would travel to go see my dad's side of the family, and then we would just go on to go eat lunch or just to spend time with each other. So in high school, the first time I was kind of introduced to the idea of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it was through a best friend. She was part of the church, and I didn't really, well, at that time I didn't know much of the church. I didn't really know the bad sides of the church that people kind of talk about. I just knew it was different from what I was in. One thing that always stuck to me was that I didn't know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was referred to as the Mormons or the Mormon Church. I always knew that the Mormon Church was wrong, according to some of the things that were taught to me by the leaders of Faith Community and Calvary Chapel. And I always was interested in different types of religion, so when I found out that she was part of the church, I didn't really ask her too many questions about it in high school. So after graduation, I had asked more questions about the church to her, and she just simply invited me to go to church with her. And so I did. I wanted to learn about different types of religion in that time of my life. So I went to one of the Sunday services. And going there, I dressed in what I thought would be my best, Sunday's best. And it was my newest pair of jeans that I had, my new Volcom shirt that I just bought, and a brand new pair of black, white, and lime green Nikes. I thought I'm gonna show up in like my Sunday's best, and then when I walked into the chapel, I realized that everyone there was dressed in suits, shirts and ties, the whole 9 yards, and I felt a little out of place. But nobody there acted differently towards me. No one there judged me, at least not to my face that I could tell, or not that I was aware of. That church service was a bit different. It was very quiet. It was very calm from what I was used to from Faith Community, from Calvary Chapel. There was no live band. We didn't stand up and clap to songs for about 30 minutes or anything like that. It was just very calm. That was the feeling I left there with, was this service was very calm. I did stay for the whole 3 hours, and we'll get more into the services and stuff like that. But yeah, it was 3 hours, and I had walked away from that day feeling that I had learned more about Jesus than I had in quite a long time. That was pretty much it for my interest for a couple months, I would say, of the Mormon church. And that's what I thought. I went to the Mormon church. It was nice, but I didn't fully intend to go back. I didn't intend to join or be baptized or anything like that. And one day I was watching my grandparents' house. They had left on vacation, so they asked me to watch the house, and I typically do. And I always have one rule, is to water the grass. So I was outside watering the grass, and I had seen some missionaries walking across the street. And I kind of knew, not who they were personally, but I knew what missionaries were. So I didn't run inside the house. I didn't lock the doors or anything like that. When they had crossed over, they had kind of started talking to me and wanted to see if I wanted to meet with them to take lessons with them. And then I was like, yeah, for sure, I'll do it, but I don't live here. I actually live in a different city, so I don't know how we're going to meet. I didn't have a car at the time. And they were like, no worries. We'll just send the missionaries in that area to you. And at that time, I kind of thought to myself, like, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. Not really expecting them to follow through on that. I would want to say a couple days later, I heard a knocking on my door. It was pretty early in the morning. I'm not a morning person, so I jumped up, run to the front door, opened the door to two missionaries in suits. And my reaction is, hold up, bro, quick, let me get some pants on. So I put on some clothes, opened the door, and they're like, hey, are you Josh? It's like, yeah, how do you guys know this? I'm like, oh, the missionaries you talked to gave us your name and address. Is that okay? I was like, oh, that's fine. I was in shock that they actually followed through with this. And I did. I ended up taking the lessons. And throughout this series, we're going to go through each lesson that they talked to me about. But as I was going through these lessons, they kept asking me if I wanted to be baptized. And I always kept saying no, because they would teach me something new. I would want to research it on my own and then come back to it. They would teach me something else new, and then I would want to research it on my own. And it just kind of went back and forth. If I had a question, they came to answer it, and things like that. And I told them one day, I was just like, if you guys really want me to be baptized, just stop teaching me new things so that I don't have more questions or want to know more. Just teach me about baptism and let's do it that way. Or just teach me about baptism, and then we'll be good. But with them, they wanted to answer all my questions, and that was something I kind of liked. That was something I just felt they were willing to spend their time trying to answer these questions. And it wasn't like they were just answering these questions right away. They would say they didn't really know the answer to the question at that time, and they would say, well, we'll study from now and the next time we meet, and hopefully we come to an answer that may clarify it a little bit better. And with that, I appreciated them spending the time to want to just teach me, to let me understand before moving on to something different or anything like that. But after every lesson, they would ask, you want to set a date to be baptized? And I would constantly saying no. It was about a year and a half until I accepted the baptism, and that happened. But between that time meeting with the missionaries, I went back to Calvary Chapel a little bit, a different one, but it was still Calvary Chapel. And I just, the same stuff, I would go in there and I just wouldn't feel that I was learning much of the Bible or much of God. I feel like I was just learning more of someone's opinion about a verse. And I get all churches are, it's their interpretation of the Bible, but I always just thought it was odd in a sense when I would go to church, we would read one passage or one verse and spend a whole hour trying to relate things from our life into that verse instead of reading through that whole, I guess, section or whole book of the Bible and then apply that whole chapter into our lives. So I went to Faith Community again one time, and that was a whole different thing than I remember as a child. When I went to Faith Community, it felt more like a production show. We had people walking down the aisles, filming the audience, filming their reaction to what was being said. When the live band was playing, it felt like a rock concert, which I'm not saying was a bad thing. It just, for me, I don't have that high energy to be clapping, to be dancing, to be singing along like that. I just wanted to go to church, go in and come out. That was pretty much what I felt I needed out of church. I just was amazed of how a church got into such a video production kind of service. Like I said, I'm not trying to say Faith Community is a bad church or anything like that. It just wasn't the setup I felt I would learn the most from. I know many people who go to Faith Community and they are genuinely great people. They are very well versed in scriptures, in God, in Jesus, in the Bible. It's just, that's not the way I felt I was going to be able to learn. So meeting with the missionaries, I kind of mentioned this to them, and they kind of said, well, have you been to one of our services? And at this time, it was probably about a year or two that I hadn't been to church, and this was about in the first lesson with the missionaries. And so I said, no, I haven't been to one of your services in a while. And so they invited me to go, and so I went. And again, I felt this calm feeling there. I felt the way that it was, how church was ran there was the way that I could relate to more. That it was just simple. For me, it wasn't about singing for 30 minutes of hymn songs. We do sing at church services now, but it's not 5 in a row or 3 in a row. Eventually, I accepted to set a date to be baptized with the missionaries. I had set a date to be baptized around the end of August of 2010. And in September was kind of the biggest thing that prevented me from going forward with religion in general. My best friend, Jesse, passed away wrestling, and to this day I don't know what the cause was. It was just simply his heart stopped during one of the matches. And this broke me. With his passing, it shook up my world like so many others that knew Jesse. With this, I was angry at God. I didn't understand why something like this was happening to Jesse's family, was happening to the wrestling community that knew him, was happening with all his friends that knew him. Why would God allow this much pain in all of our lives like this? And I told the missionaries, like, hey, I don't think I could be baptized. I don't want to be part of a church when you guys told me that God blesses people who do good, and I thought going to be baptized was something good, that was the step to follow Christ. And I looked at it at a perspective of just me being, why is this happening to me? And so I just kind of stopped talking to the missionaries for a little bit. And coming back to my friend who was part of the church, she also knew Jesse and was very close to him as well. And she kind of opened my eyes from a different perspective to look at it. And so I agreed to be baptized. So I was baptized in October of 2010, and things were going fine. I was still, of course, I was still shocked and was still angry at God, but I knew I eventually would get over it. They always say time heals things. And so I kept on going with the lessons, going to church, and I was actively going to church for about 4 months, 5 months. And then that fall, so October 2010, that February of 2011, my dad passed away. And that was kind of like the last straw for me. And I just didn't understand why doing good things, good blessings weren't coming down. Why did my dad have to go? Why did Jesse have to go? Why was this 5 months of me trying to go to church becoming the 5 worst months of my life? And so I stopped going to church. I stopped going to school. I stopped just everything. I stopped wrestling. I just didn't want to go continue. I just didn't want to live life missing those two people in my lives. And so it took me a long while to finally function normally again. There was a time where I went down probably the darkest places of life, and honestly I wouldn't wish that upon anybody, and to have to go through that. It took about 4 years for me to finally get things going. I started school again, I started working full time, things like that, and it took me a long while to get over that feeling of just sorrow. Of course, I'm not over the missing of them. I don't think anyone who loses somebody that close will ever get over missing them or get over the fact that they're gone. You just get used to moving on with life. So I started coaching wrestling. I was going back to school. I was finally getting my life back on track, but there was still something missing. I thought to myself, why am I not happy? I have a job. I am good with school. I'm coaching these kids. Things seem good, but there was still something missing. And I remember thinking this on a weekend. I was just laying in bed and I thought, what is missing? And I kind of thought maybe I need to go back to church. And this was just something I was mad at myself for thinking, that no, there's no way church is going to make things better. Last time church made everything worse. But at this time, it was, I want to say either April or October. I'm not sure which month it was, but I knew in April and October the church has general conference, which the church leaders speak to the entirety of the church. And we'll talk about that in a different video, but so I knew that general conference is always televised or broadcasted online and things like that. So I logged onto LDS.org, and sure enough, general conference was streaming. So I clicked on the link, and I was watching the end of that session. The one talk I remember most was "See Yourself in the Temple," and with this, it finally clicked. It clicked that this is what was missing. This was the happiness that was missing. That I needed to become what Jesus wants us to become. That what God wants us to be. That I needed to keep the commandments that were laid out in the Bible, in scriptures, to be part of God's plan. And reading scriptures, we all learn that the end goal is to be in the presence of God after we die, and that's, I think, is the biggest form of joy that I could kind of think of or just can imagine. So with that, I went back to church, and so now I've been back to church for about 2.5 years. While attending Institute, this is when I started to learn more about church history, more about the controversies of the church, and it led me to YouTube. It led me to researching things online. It led me to watching debates. It led me to apologetics on both sides of the topics. This past general conference, one of the general leaders of the church kind of offered a suggestion of using social media to advocate for the church. So I kind of noticed more people coming up with channels and things about either why they're in church or why they left the church. And with this, it's just interesting to watch both sides of the stories. And it kind of got me thinking, hey, I could do the same thing. Instead of this is why you should join or this is why you should leave if you are in, I just wanted to present things that were just on my mind about what I'm going through as a member of the church, of to see if you could still be a member and still have questions of church doctrines and things like that, to see if you can still come closer to Christ, or if I just don't feel that these issues can allow me to come closer to Christ. Like I said, I'm not trying to bring anyone into the church, or I'm not trying to lead people out of the church. I just want to invite everyone to come on this journey with me to find the truth, or to find resolution, I would say, with the conflicts I have with some of the teachings I'm taught. So that's pretty much where I'm at now. And that was a brief summary, probably not as short as I wanted it to be, but a summary of where I started with religion and where I'm at now. And like I said, the end of all this journey is I intend to come closer to Christ in either way. And I thank everybody for watching. I thank everyone for coming on this journey with me. And hopefully I see everyone in the next episode, in which we will finally start getting into doctrines of the church. Thank everyone again, and I hope to see you next time.